a widow. I never imagined that the person who'd make me feel the loneliest in the world would be the daughter I held in my arms as a baby, the one who cried for me in the middle of the night when she had a high fever. And I certainly never pictured myself huddled under a bridge in the dead of a Charleston winter, simply because I had nowhere else to go. My name is Kennedy. I'm 59 years old. December nights in Charleston are brutal. The freezing rain lashed down. An icy wind whipped through the cobblestone streets, finding its way through my thin coat. I dragged 2 suitcases, the wheels clattering on the flooded sidewalk, clutching a framed photo of my husband to my chest. John, the man I loved for 35 years, lost his battle with cancer a year ago. Now all I had left was this photo, a few changes of clothes, and a broken heart. I stopped near the Ashley River waterfront park, sank onto a soaking wet bench, pressed the photo to my chest, and let the tears fall, mixing with the rain. I had nowhere to go, no one to call. My daughter Emily and her husband Ryan had just kicked me out of their place a few hours earlier. They called me a freeloader. Can't you believe that? Emily, the child I sacrificed my own dreams to raise, didn't say a word to stop them. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the memories, but they came crashing back like a tidal wave. Earlier that evening, in their cramped apartment in the historic district, the air was thick with tension, like before a storm. I was doing dishes. In the kitchen, the smell of dish soap mixing with the aroma of the roast I'd made for dinner. Emily was at the table, scrolling through her phone, looking tired, when Ryan suddenly spoke up. "Mom," he said, "I think it's time we had a little talk. Emily and I aren't a charity." Emily stiffened a little. I stared at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" He smirked. "It means, how long is this going to go on? You don't work, you don't contribute. We have bills we didn't sign up for, extra mouths to feed." My breath caught in my throat, my heart shattering into a million pieces. I looked at Emily desperate. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's probably for the best," she mumbled. "Ryan's right, Mom. We've been struggling for the past 6 months. For everyone's sake, I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just stood there stunned, the sponge still in my hand, water dripping onto the floor. "Ryan, I've been trying to help," I said, my voice shaking. "I cook, I clean, I do all the housework." But he cut me off, pointing to a piece of paper. "Read it. Emily agrees." My hand trembled as I picked up the paper. It was an email from Ryan to Emily in bold. "If you don't get rid of your mother, I'm not paying the rent anymore. I'm done supporting you both." My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I turned to Emily, pleading, "Emily, just say something." But she kept her head down, staring at the floor, her lips pressed into a tight line. Another silence, sharper than any knife. Ryan sneered, gesturing towards the door. "See? Emily agrees. Pack your things and get out of our house." I wanted to scream, to shake Emily and make her look at me, but I couldn't. I just stood there, feeling like my whole world was collapsing. I thought about this moment a few times. Maybe it started with the little things, the way he'd roll his eyes if I asked a question, the way he'd change the TV channel in the middle of a show I was watching. Once I heard him mutter "freeloader" as he passed me in the hallway. I tried to convince myself I'd misheard him, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. And Emily was always silent. She'd always pretend to be doing something else during those moments. I looked for support, a word, anything from her, but she always brushed it off. "He's stressed," she'd say. "Work's been tough lately." I dragged myself to the small room where I slept, a cramped space filled with old furniture. I opened the closet, pulled out 2 suitcases, and stuffed in a few changes of clothes, a pair of shoes, and the framed photo of John. Each item was a piece of memory, but now they just felt like burdens. I stopped in front of a little picture, hanging on the wall, a crude drawing Emily had made when she was 5, of 2 people holding hands under a rainbow. I used to proudly display it, but now Ryan had covered it with a cheap basketball poster. I touched the drawing, tears welling up in my eyes. I'd given up my biggest dream of becoming an artist, not because I stopped loving art, but because I believed being a mother meant putting your child first. I folded up that dream and started working overtime at the factory. For 12 years, as long as my daughter had a future, any sacrifice was worth it. I didn't buy new clothes, didn't go out, didn't dare take a sick day. All so Emily could go to college, so she could have a life I didn't have. I thought it was love, but now I just feel like a fool. I pulled the suitcases towards the door, the wheels rattling on the hardwood floor. Emily didn't come to see me off. Ryan didn't even bother to look up. I stopped, looking at my daughter one last time. "Emily, I love you, always." Not a word in response. I stepped into the hallway, the door slamming shut behind me, the sound of the rain outside drowning out my sobs. I stood under the awning, the rain pelting my face, my coat soaked through. I didn't have money for a taxi, no phone to call anyone. I dragged the suitcases away, not knowing where I was going, just knowing I had to leave. That night, I wandered through the streets of Charleston, the rain never stopping. I ended up under the Market Street Bridge, where the homeless often stayed. I sat down, leaning against a concrete pillar, the suitcases blocking the wind. The rain soaked through my clothes, chilling me to the bone. I hugged the photo of John, whispering, "What am I going to do with this old broken body, John? A woman with no home, no family." I closed my eyes trying to sleep, but the traffic noise and the pain in my heart wouldn't let me. Near dawn, a police car pulled up, the flashlight shining in my face. A cop, his voice hard, said, "You can't sleep here. This is public property. Move along." I nodded, not arguing, and pulled myself to my feet, dragging the suitcases. My legs were shaking, not just from the cold, but from humiliation. Me, a mother, who once had a home, now being chased away like a vagrant. Sometimes I wonder if I had insisted on moving into the assisted living facility like I'd planned, would things have been different? But Emily stopped me. She smiled, took my hand, and said, "Mom, come live with us. It'll be less lonely for you, and you can help us out." A sentence as light as a breeze. I believed it. My heart leapt with hope. I cooked, I cleaned, I sang lullabies and played with my 4-year-old grandson, just to be close to my daughter, and grandson, just to feel like I was still useful to their little family. But then, as the days went by, I realized I was just the person who washed everyone's clothes without anyone remembering my name, the person who made the beds every morning without a thank you. I was the unpaid maid, and when they didn't need me anymore, they kicked me to the curb. I remember little Emily, the way she used to run to hug me after storms, calling out, "Mommy, I love you the best in the world." Now she's the one who created this storm, and I'm the one being swept away. But deep down, I feel a tiny spark, not hope, but anger. Dragging my heavy feet down the road, I thought of the cheap motel on the outskirts of town, where low buildings rose up in the middle of empty lots, and the sound of distant car horns echoed. The manager, a skinny old man with a cigarette dangling from his lips, glanced at me and my suitcases, not asking anything except, "A week in advance, $150. Take it or leave it." I rummaged through my wallet, counting the loose change left, over from selling my pearl necklace, John's wedding gift. I handed over the money, took the key, and dragged myself up the rickety wooden stairs to room number 12. The room was small, with a musty smell that stung my nostrils, the walls stained with yellow spots. A single bed with a worn, faded sheet, a small wooden table, and a window overlooking a trash-filled parking lot. I put down my suitcases, sat on the bed, John's photo in my hand. "I'm so helpless, John," I whispered. The next day, I checked my phone, hoping for a message from Emily. But what I got was a punch to the gut, a text from her sent right after I left the apartment. "Don't freeload off us anymore, Mom." The word freeload was like a knife, exactly what Ryan had said. I trembled, my fingers swiping across the screen, wanting to call her, to scream that I wasn't like that. But when I dialed her number, all I heard was, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." The following week, I sent another text, then another. Happy birthday, small updates. Silence stretched on, as if I had never existed in her life. 3 months passed, each day seeming longer than the last. I was just trying to survive. I called a few old acquaintances, John's friends, hoping they could help me find a job or a temporary place to stay. But no one answered. One friend, Susan, texted back, "I'm really busy, Kennedy. Sorry." I walked to the nearby stores, a supermarket, a bakery, a coffee shop, and filled out job applications. I said I could do anything: cashier, cleaning, dishwashing. But the answer was always the same. "You're too old. We need someone fast." Then they looked at me as if my very existence was an inconvenience. I tried to get a job, but no one wanted to get involved with a grieving widow in her late 50s with no recent work experience. One evening, I decided to do what I'd been putting off, waiting for a reply from my daughter. Hold a memorial for John, the husband who had spent almost his entire life with me. I couldn't let it pass like any other day. I rummaged through my wallet. All that was left was $3, 3 old crumpled dollar bills. I hadn't eaten since noon, my stomach growling like it wanted to scream. But I still put on my coat, went out into the freezing cold, and walked almost a mile. To the nearest grocery store, I took a small candle from my suitcase, something I used to light when the power went out in the old house. In the motel room, I put the cake on the table, stuck in the candle and lit it. The dim light shone on the photo of John, his eyes seeming to look at me. "Are you so disappointed in me, John?" I whispered, my voice choked. "I really don't know what to do anymore, Emily. She's not the little girl we knew anymore." The candle burned out, leaving behind the smell of wax and darkness. I cried, hugging the photo, feeling like John was leaving me again. That night I had a high fever. My clothes were soaked with sweat, my head pounding. I hugged the photo of John, mumbling Emily's name, as if calling her name would make the fever go away. I wanted to dial my daughter's number, to hear her voice, even if it was just to hear her say, "Don't bother me, Mom." But I didn't dare. I was afraid the number you have dialed is no longer in service would be the final blow. I rummaged through my suitcase, found a packet of expired painkillers, and swallowed 2 with tap water from the rusty faucet. I lay down, feeling like my body was dissolving, like I was no longer Kennedy Walsh, but just a faint ghost. No one needed me. No one asked if I was okay. The musty motel room was the only place left that I could call home. I ate dry bread, drank instant coffee, each sip just to save a few pennies. I didn't dare look in the mirror. I didn't want to see the woman with the tangled gray hair, sunken eyes, and pale skin. Even my own reflection felt foreign to me. I had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis a few years ago. The disease caused me pain every morning when I woke up. The doctor prescribed medication, just 1 pill a day to relieve the pain and stiffness in the morning. But I couldn't afford it anymore. So I lay curled up on cold nights, my teeth chattering, my limbs so numb I couldn't lift a glass of water. But in that pain, I began to feel something else. Not hope, but stubbornness. I didn't want to give up. I didn't want my daughter and son-in-law to see me as pathetic and pitiful. I looked at the keepsake box on the table, thinking about my mother's diary. I hadn't opened it, wasn't ready to face Mary's memories, but I knew inside it might be the answer. Maybe between the musty pages, I would find a way out, a way to stand up. I touched the box, my fingers trembling. "Mom," I whispered as if Mary could hear me. "If you were here, what would you tell me now?" One evening, as I was rummaging through a box of old family keepsakes, trying to feel close to something, anything, I found it. My mother's old diary. I hadn't read it in years, maybe never, but something drew me to it. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, flipped through the pages, and that's when I found it. A name, a truth, a secret that changed everything. I remember the moment clearly, my hands shaking, my heart racing, because suddenly I wasn't just a mother who'd been kicked to the curb. I was someone completely different, and for the first time in months, I smiled. They took everything from me, but they have no idea what's coming. After that night, the days blurred together like watercolor paintings streaked across a wet canvas. The motel room reeked of stale air and distant cigarette smoke. The hum of the vending machine outside my door became a lullaby of failure. I texted Emily again, a simple message. "I'm okay, just wanted to know how you are." No response. I tried again 2 weeks later, just a heart emoji. Nothing. I told myself she was busy, that she would come around, that Ryan must be twisting things. But as the weeks passed, that hope began to rot inside me. My money was running out. I tried to find part-time work, grocery stores, front desks, even a diner off the highway. But I was either overqualified or didn't fit, which was just polite code for too old and too tired. One night, I sat on the floor of that room, sorting through the one box I'd brought that wasn't clothes. It was a dusty memory box from the house, a few old photos, some letters, and tucked at the bottom was a small, leather-bound book, my mother's diary. I was surprised. I didn't remember packing it. I almost put it back, but something familiar in my hand made me stop. I turned on the old lamp on the bedside table and opened the first page. Her handwriting was unchanged from the notes she used to tuck into my lunchbox as a child, rounded, neat lettering, always in ink. At first, it was normal stuff, the weather, church, complaints about grocery prices. But then I came to a line dated June. "He came again today, said he wished things were different, that he wished I could be his wife, but he has a family, a business, a name to protect. Kennedy will never know. She must never know. I just pray that one day she understands how much I loved her, even if she was born from a mistake and desire." I read it. Then I read it again. My heart constricted. The diary entries recontextualized my entire life, from daughter to heir. I flipped through, entry after entry, hints, memories, meetings at hotels, small cash payments she'd tried to refuse, but desperately needed. He said he'd made arrangements, that if anything happened to him, he'd make sure Kennedy had something, a piece of what he'd built. The diary mentioned a man, Robert Ellison, Caldwell's lawyer, the keeper of his ultimate secret. I closed the diary, my heart pounding. This wasn't just my mother's story. I rummaged through my suitcase, found my old cell phone, and looked up Robert Ellison. An old website for a law office in Charleston came up with a faded phone number. I dialed it, my voice trembling as I said, "I'm Kennedy Walsh, Mary Harper's daughter. I need to see you." The person on the other end, a man with a warm voice, requested a face-to-face meeting. "Tomorrow 10 a.m., he said. I nodded. The next morning I walked through the streets of Charleston, my thin coat not enough to keep me warm. Robert Ellison's office was in an old building, with carved wooden doors and the faint smell of coffee. Ellison, a 65-year-old man with gray hair and kind eyes, stood up as I walked in. "You look like Mary," he said, his voice trembling slightly. He told me that he had been a close friend of my mother, even proposed to her, but she refused because she wanted to protect me from the gossip. He handed me a sealed envelope from Caldwell, along with a thick stack of documents. "This is what William left for you," he said. "Mary wanted you to have a future. Caldwell, though a coward, kept his promise." I opened the envelope, my hands shaking. Caldwell's letter read, "Kennedy, you are my flesh and blood. I wasn't brave enough to give you my name, but I'm leaving you a legacy." I continued reading, my eyes blurring with tears. An inheritance worth $1.5 million in cash, stock in Caldwell's real estate companies, and a secret trust fund. I was stunned, unable to believe the numbers in front of me. Is this real?" I asked, my voice cracking. Ellison nodded. "It's all yours, always was." He handed me a small key, saying, "This is the key to Caldwell's safe deposit box. There's one more thing in there, but you have to open it yourself." I clutched the key, my heart filled with curiosity and determination. I stood up, walked to the mirror hanging in the office. I looked into my tired eyes, but this time I saw a spark. "I'm not who they threw away," I whispered. "I'm the daughter of a man who built this whole city." I cried, not because of the money, but because for the first time I felt like I was chosen, not a burden, not an afterthought. But I was also angry at my mother for hiding this secret, angry at myself for living in the dark for so long. In the documents, I realized Caldwell owned a large portion of real estate in Charleston, including the neighborhood where Emily and Ryan lived, the apartment they rented, the grocery store Emily shopped at, my grandson's preschool. An idea flashed in my mind, making my heart race. I could not only buy back the building where they kicked me out. I could own the whole block, controlling every little corner of their lives. It would all be in the name of KH Holdings, a shell corporation. To hide my identity, I used part of the inheritance to rent a short-term apartment in downtown Charleston, near the historic district where the church bells rang every morning. The apartment was small but clean, with bright hardwood floors and windows overlooking the cobblestone street. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at the woman with the tangled long hair and tired eyes. "Enough," I whispered. I grabbed the scissors, cutting my hair into a short, blunt style. The first lock of hair fell to the tile floor like a broken string. Then the second, the third. Each snip decisive, without hesitation, without regret. With each closing of the scissors, a piece of memory also fell. The evenings washing dishes. In silence, the nights curled up, not daring to cough. My daughter calling me a burden, a freeloader, all falling to the floor. I started dressing differently, more polished, more intentional. Not flashy, just invisible in a new way, the kind of invisible that gets you through doors. I started learning. I knew $3 million was an opportunity, but if I didn't use it right, it would disappear like the loose change I used to count to pay for the motel. I signed up for an online real estate investment course, watched YouTube videos about investing. I learned the language of business, not because I wanted to build an empire, but because I wanted to protect myself. I would never be helpless again. That's when I found it. The listing buried on a real estate auction website. In the inheritance papers from Ellison, I saw the list of Caldwell's properties, including that neighborhood. A bold idea flashed. With $3 million, I could buy not just one building, but the whole block, turning it into the domain of KH Holdings, the shell corporation I would set up to hide my identity. Ryan would never know who was behind it until it was too late. I contacted Ellison, asking him to help set up the company. "Are you sure, Kennedy?" he asked, his voice worried. "Absolutely," I replied, my eyes hardening. Amidst the bold moves, I didn't forget the compassion my mother taught me. One morning I read an email from Emily's neighborhood management company, reporting that a single mother named Sarah, who lived in the same building, was behind on her rent. I remembered Sarah, a thin woman about 30 years old, who had cried on the stairs because she didn't have enough money to buy milk for her child. I transferred $2,000 through Ellison, asking him to pay Sarah's rent, but not to let her know my name. Tell her it's a gift from a stranger, I instructed. I wasn't doing this for praise. I was doing it because I knew what desperation felt like when I sat under the bridge, hugging John's photo in the rain. And Ryan doesn't know it yet, but every brick in his life now has my name on it. Each day, I felt stronger. One evening, I opened my laptop and checked my email from Ellison. He'd sent a notice of auction. The entire block where Emily and Ryan lived, including their building, the grocery store, and the preschool, was being put up for sale due to tax liens. I smiled, my fingers dancing across the keyboard. This is my chance, I thought. But first, I had to get my ducks in a row, legally speaking. I got back in touch with Robert Ellison, the lawyer who'd given me my $3 million inheritance. He helped me finalize the creation of KH Holdings, a shell corporation to hide my identity, using the initials from my name and my mother's. "What do you plan to do with that block, Kennedy?" he asked, a hint of worry in his voice. I smiled, my eyes hardening. "I'm going to give them a taste of what it feels like to lose control." Ellison nodded, not asking any more questions, and prepared the paperwork for the auction. The block, including the 12-unit apartment building where Emily and Ryan lived, the corner grocery store, my grandson's preschool, and 3 other rental properties, was being auctioned off with a starting bid of $2.1 million due to tax liens. With KH Holdings, I was ready to make a bid. The auction took place at a real estate office in Charleston, the atmosphere as tense as a chess match. I wore sunglasses and a blue blazer, my mother's color, the color of strength. I sat in the back row, quietly observing the other investors, raising their paddles. A middle-aged man in a gray suit kept upping the price, but I didn't flinch. Through KH Holdings' representative, I made the final bid. $2.3 million. The room went silent. The auctioneer slammed the gavel. "Sold!" I clenched my fist, my heart pounding. I'd done it. The entire block was now mine, every corner of Emily and Ryan's lives, from where they slept to where they bought their milk. I didn't stop at just owning it. I wanted the block to bear my mark, not just for revenge, but to help others, like Sarah, the single mother I'd paid the rent for. I ordered a complete renovation of the area through the management company, painting the building walls blue, installing security cameras at the entrances, building a small playground for the children with swings and a slide. I visited the block. One morning, standing in front of the building, admiring the newly painted walls. A mother pushing a stroller passed by, smiling. "This place finally looks brighter," she said. I nodded, but my eyes were fixed on the window of Emily and Ryan's apartment. I knew they weren't feeling that brightness. I ordered a rent increase for all the apartments, but for Emily and Ryan's unit, I raised it from $200 to $3,600 a month, citing market rates. I told the management company to send a notice. "Due to renovations and market demand, rent is daily, this being adjusted." I imagined Ryan's face when he read the notice, his sneering smile turning into a fit of rage. I wasn't wrong. 2 days later, the management company forwarded me an angry email from Ryan. "This is highway robbery. We'll sue if the price isn't lowered." I smiled, saving the email to a private folder. He had no idea what was coming. I wasn't just relying on rent to get my revenge. I wanted to know everything about Ryan, the man who called me a freeloader, who threw my suitcases out the door. I hired a private investigator, asking him to investigate Ryan's finances. The results stunned me. Ryan had used my personal information, my social security number, my date of birth, to borrow $5,000 through an online app when I was still living with them. He blamed it on me, not being in control of my finances, and Emily had covered for him, saying, "Maybe Mom accidentally signed something and forgot." I saved the transaction emails and invoices, my hands shaking with anger. This wasn't just evidence. This was a weapon. I put them in a password-protected folder, waiting for the day of reckoning. Meanwhile, Ryan was starting to lose it. The management company reported that he was rummaging through Emily's belongings, yelling in the apartment. "What do you know about this, huh? Who's behind this damn rent increase?" Emily, according to the manager, was just trembling, not answering. I imagined her sitting on the chair, her eyes downcast, like the night she was silent when Ryan kicked me out. A part of me ached. Emily was still my daughter, the child who drew the rainbow picture for me. But another part, the part that had huddled under the bridge, had a fever in the motel, reminded me that she had chosen to stand by Ryan. She had to feel the consequences. He rummaged through Emily's purse, throwing her wallet and keys on the floor, roaring, "You're on your mother's side, aren't you? You've been contacting her behind my back?" Emily shook her head, her voice small. I didn't do anything. But Ryan didn't stop. He raised his hand, and a slap rang out so hard that Emily staggered back, her cheek bright red. "Don't lie!" he screamed. Emily was stunned, her hand covering her face, then ran into the bathroom, locking the door. Ryan punched the wall, muttering something, then slumped into a chair. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my skin. I wanted to pound on that apartment door, to pull Emily out of there, but I knew, if I showed up now, she wouldn't listen. She had chosen to stand by Ryan, had covered for him when he took my information to borrow $5,000, had said, "Maybe Mom accidentally signed something and forgot." I turned back to the screen, seeing Emily sitting in the bathroom, her knees drawn up, sobbing. Neighbors heard the yelling, but no one dared call the police. They were afraid of Ryan, the man who had threatened an old man in the building just for parking in the wrong spot. But there was one person who wasn't afraid. Mrs. Helen, a 70-year-old woman downstairs, who had thanked me through the management company for the new playground, took action. She sent an anonymous complaint to the police, writing, "He's hitting his wife. I can't stay silent anymore." The management company forwarded the notice to me, and I saved it along with Ryan's fraud evidence. He was digging his own grave. The next morning I received a voicemail from Emily. Her voice was trembling, choked with emotion. "Mom, I'm sorry. I just wanted everything to be okay, but Mom, I need you." I listened, my hands shaking, tears welling up. I remembered little. Emily running to hug me after the storm, calling out, "Mom, you're my life." I remembered the rainbow picture she drew, now covered by Ryan's basketball poster. But I also remembered the night I huddled under the bridge, had a fever in the motel, hugging John's photo without daring to call her. I wanted to answer, to say that I still loved her. But I couldn't. Not now. Emily needed to feel the loss, the way she made me feel. I saved the voicemail but didn't reply, my heart aching. Emily and Ryan's lives were becoming more and more suffocating. Through the security cameras, I saw Ryan becoming increasingly aggressive, often yelling on the phone, slamming doors when he came home late. Emily hardly left the house, except to take my grandson to preschool, the school now bearing the KH Holdings logo. Once I overheard Emily's call with a friend through the hidden microphone in the camera. She was crying. "I lost a child once, because of the pressure from Ryan. I thought if I stayed I could fix things, but I was wrong. I was stunned, my hand clutching the photo of John. Emily had lost a baby, and she was clinging to Ryan because she thought it was a way to keep her family together. I hurt, but I was also angry. She had chosen him, even when he threw me out, on the street. Even when he slapped her, I wasn't happy to see Emily in pain. But I knew this was the only way for her to wake up. Ryan, in his madness, sent more threatening emails to the management company. "I'm going to find out who's behind KH Holdings, and he's going to regret it." He didn't know that he was me, the woman he once called useless, who lived in the corner of his house, cooking and watching his child without a thank you. I saved the email, adding it to the evidence folder. Each of his threats was a brick building his own downfall. The cracks weren't just in their relationship, they were in their very survival. And yet through it all, I kept my distance, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about resolution, about Ryan's world shrinking until he realized how small he was, and about Emily deciding whether she would stay in the cage or find the key that I had placed right in front of her. I knew she wasn't ready, but the walls were closing in, and secrets have a way of leaking through the cracks. I hadn't expected the knock on the door that night. There had been quiet days, no emails from the manager, no voicemails from Emily, no more anonymous threats, just silence, like a storm hiding in the distance, waiting. But when the knock came, soft, slow, as if the person behind it wasn't even sure they should knock again, something in my chest tightened. Not from surprise, but from intuition. A feeling that something had been waiting a long time to happen. I went to open the door. Emily stood there, soaked in the night rain, her hair plastered to her forehead, her coat soaked through, and her shoes making heavy squish-squish sounds. She clutched a grocery bag to her chest, as if trying to hold on to a small piece of normalcy amidst everything that was collapsing. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying for a long time, but there were no tears left to fall. Her lips parted, trembling, but no sound came out, as if every word had fallen somewhere on the way from home to here. I said nothing, just quietly stepped aside. She came in, each step as if she were stepping through an invisible wall that she herself had built. Rainwater dripped on the wooden floor, leaving cold footprints. I handed her a dry towel. She took it without looking, without speaking. We moved like two strangers, knowing each other too well to pretend, but too hurt to touch each other with words. I reheated the kettle, took out 2 cups of chamomile tea, the kind that little Emily used to call sunshine tea. Now, the sun had long gone out in her eyes. She sat on the edge of the sofa, barely touching the seat, as if not allowing herself to be comfortable, as if every second she stayed here was borrowed, and maybe she also thought she didn't deserve to stay. Maybe she was right. The teacup was placed in her hand, a slight steam rising, but Emily's eyes were only fixed on the liquid inside, as if trying to find the answer from the warm, faintly scented water. Her eyes were empty, as if she was looking inside herself and not recognizing herself. "He's not who I thought he was." She finally spoke, her voice hoarse, broken. I remained silent, just listening, not interrupting, not rushing. "I mean," she swallowed hard, "a part of me always knew, but I kept telling myself it was because he was tired, because of the pressure at work, because he needed me by his side, and if I was patient, if I had enough love and tolerance, then he would change." I still said nothing. Perhaps because those words I had said to myself a long time ago. She looked up, for the first time looking directly into my eyes, a look no longer angry or regretful, but fearful, a deep fear. "He thinks someone is watching us," she whispered. He started checking my phone, reading my emails, checking my diary, as if I'm a threat, as if I'm also plotting against him. The air in the room seemed to thicken. There was no more rain outside the window, only the ticking of the clock and the heavy breathing that she was trying to suppress. "Last week," Emily said, her voice like a taut thread stretched between 2 abysses, "he followed me to work." She paused, taking a weary breath. "He said it was just to make sure that I wasn't involved in anything." A shiver ran down her spine that didn't come from the cold outside, but from the truce that was slowly taking shape. "He asked me if there was anything I was hiding. Then he asked if you were hiding anything." My breath caught, not because of the question, but because the person asking that question was someone whom my daughter had trusted more than anyone, and because my daughter didn't deny it. I told him that I hadn't spoken to you in weeks, Emily continued, her voice monotonous, as if reading a painful script that had been rehearsed many times in her head. That I didn't even know where you were. She stopped, but I knew, and she knew too, that it was a lie that had been prepared and uttered only to protect herself from the irrational rage of a man. I raised my head for the first time during the conversation, looking directly into her eyes. You found my building, she admitted, no longer evading. It came up in a security notice. Same management company. I figured it out. Actually, she gave a small, sad laugh. It wasn't hard to figure out at all. Emily had always been smart. Ever since she was little, but smart, I knew well, didn't always mean brave. And now, sitting across from me, she was like someone who had just opened her eyes after a long daze and couldn't bear the sight of what she was seeing. I said nothing. There was only silence. Not silence out of anger, but because there was too much to say, and also nothing left to say. Not yet, Emily whispered, almost an admission. I miss you, but I don't know how to be around you anymore. My hand tightened around the teacup, the porcelain growing cold in my palm. You left, I said, my voice catching in my throat, like a slow drag on a memory. And you let him push me out of your house, out of your life. Finally, I said it out loud, the accusation that had always been in my heart, but now had the strength to become a sound. No, Emily, you didn't let him do it. I looked at her, my eyes not reproachful, just truthful. You took his side. The statement was like a stone, dropped into already troubled water. Emily went still. Her eyes blinked rapidly, her lips parted as if wanting to object, to deny, like a child wanting to reclaim her innocence. But then she said nothing, because there was nothing left to defend. I stood up, walked to the window, looking out at the night that was soaked with rain. Out there were the wet streets, silent and indifferent, just like the night I dragged my suitcases out of their apartment. That night, I said, my eyes not leaving the darkness out there. I waited, just one word, just one call. A door opened a crack, but all I got was silence. Behind me, I heard Emily's sigh, a fragile, broken sigh like glass being lightly shaken. I didn't think things would get so bad, she said softly. I thought I could control him. I turned my head, my eyes softening but not weakening. You can't control someone like that, Emily. I sat down across from her slowly. You only have two choices, either continue living with him or leave him. She didn't answer, and I didn't wait either. The answer sometimes lies in the silence. We sat like that for a long time. Two women sharing the same blood, but too much distance, too much unnamed pain. Maybe it could never be taken back. Maybe not yet. When Emily finally stood up to leave, she put the teacup down carefully, as if returning something that didn't belong to her. Her eyes were red, not from the tears that had fallen, but from the ones that hadn't yet fallen. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, her voice trembling. I just wanted to remember what it felt like to be safe. I walked her to the door. We passed each other like shadows of people who used to know each other, used to love each other, then lost each other. But as she was about to step outside, she suddenly turned back and wrapped her arms around me. The hug was so unexpected that at first I stood still, not reacting. Then very slowly, very hesitantly, I also reached out and hugged her. Not strongly, not completely, just a gentle gesture, as if trying to hold on to a fragile memory so it wouldn't shatter again. When Emily let go, she didn't say goodbye. She just looked at me one more time, that looked full of pain, full of things that couldn't be put into words, then turned away, quietly stepping into the night. And as the door closed behind her, I felt something change, not forgiveness. Not yet, but something that faintly lit up in my chest, a very small spark. Something that, maybe if she allowed it, one day would grow into forgiveness. The invitation was sent out on a Tuesday morning. No flash, no sensationalism. A standard polite email from the management office. Mandatory meeting for residents. Topic: building renovation plans. Location: ground floor common room. Time: Thursday evening next week. Note: attendance is required. Questions are welcome. I knew Ryan would come. He couldn't resist. People like Ryan always need a target, a name to vent their anger on, a face to blame. And he had no idea that the person behind everything that was shrinking his world was the woman he had once kicked out of his apartment like an outdated piece of furniture. That evening, I arrived early. I chose a seat near the back, staying quiet. I wore a charcoal blazer, dark trousers, and neat and discreet. My hair had been cut short, lightly curled, falling naturally over my shoulders. I was no longer the woman who had begged for a place in Emily's kitchen. No longer the one who was called a burden. No longer the invisible mother in her own family. The room gradually filled up. Residents trickled in, some curious, others frowning uncomfortably at being forced to attend, most as indifferent as always. The fluorescent lights shone brightly, the plastic chairs scraping against the floor with a screech. A boring meeting until Ryan walked in. He stormed in like a storm that had just heard it had been insulted. The collar of his shirt was open, 2 buttons, his tie loose, his eyes as sharp as knives, and behind was Emily. She walked behind her husband without a word, without a glance to the left or right, her hand clutching her purse, her eyes looking down at her shoes as if wanting to disappear from the room. Ryan didn't look around, didn't recognize me. He just headed straight for the management table at the front of the room. "Where's the person in charge today?" he asked, his voice not loud but sharp like an order. "I want to talk in person." The manager just smiled. "All questions will be answered after the presentation." Ryan scoffed, snorting as if he had been through dozens of meaningless meetings. Emily still looked down, biting her lower lip slightly. I sat still, not moving, not saying anything, but in my chest was a steady drumbeat, each beat like a footstep moving towards justice. The presentation began. The usual announcements about renovations, upgraded security system, new insulation for the coming winter. The backyard would be paved and replanted. Everything had a clear goal: to make life better, safer, even for those who once didn't believe. They deserved it. And each of those items was partly funded by the rent, the thing that Ryan had once called licensed robbery. Then came the ending. The manager looked up, her voice clear. "We would especially like to thank KH Holdings, the building owner, for not only investing financially, but also putting the residents' interests at the center. The owner is currently here and is ready to answer questions if you have any." I stood up, a simple movement, but with the weight of a brass bell in the still afternoon. The whole room turned around. Some frowned, some were stunned. Emily looked up. Ryan frowned, not understanding, until I stepped forward, slowly, steadily. Not hasty, but not faltering either. I turned to face the crowd. The light from the ceiling shone down on my hair, making it gleam like a soft steel edge. I smiled. "Good evening, I'm Kennedy Harper. I'm the owner of this building." Ryan jumped up as if stabbed. His chair dragged sharply on the floor, creating a piercing screech. Emily's mouth dropped open. What is this, some kind of joke?" Ryan shouted, his voice distorted with shock. "You're behind this?" You raised the rent. You're pushing us to the brink. I looked at him, looked for a long time. And for the first time, I saw clearly, sweat soaking the back of his collar, dark circles under his eyes, and a kind of panic seeping into his voice, something he had previously hidden very well. There's no game here, Ryan, I said, my voice gentle but firm. Just the truth, and a little late justice. He took a step forward, his hands clenching into fists. You set a trap. You manipulated everything. You want to destroy us. I'm not destroying anyone. I'm renovating this building. I'm creating equal opportunities for all residents, including you. The only thing I'm not doing is forgetting. And the only thing I'm not allowing is to be disrespected one more time. Ryan opened his mouth, but didn't get a chance to speak. I turned to everyone. My voice rang out evenly. If you have any questions about the insulation system, the cost breakdown, or any changes, I will be happy to answer them after the meeting. Thank you. I stepped aside. The meeting continued as normal, but the tension didn't. It clung to the atmosphere, like a thin layer of dust that no one dared to brush off. Ryan still stood there, not speaking, not moving, just trembling, not from the cold, but from anger, from the humiliation he hadn't anticipated. Emily sat near him, her hands clasped tightly together in her lap, her eyes wide and glistening, with tears, not knowing if it was from shock, from shame, or from something else that was breaking down inside her. When the meeting ended, some of the residents approached me. They shook hands, asked questions. Some even thanked me for being transparent and fair. Many seemed surprised. Some were still skeptical, but no one was hostile. No one looked at me like an invisible shadow anymore. Ryan waited until the room was almost empty. When there was no one left to play the audience for, he walked towards me, each step as if trying to keep his composure. He stopped in front of me, his eyes blazing. You think you've won? He growled, his voice hissing like a curse. But this is nothing. You've created an enemy. I didn't back down. I looked straight at him, my eyes level, not angry, not pitying, just truthful. No. You created yourself. On the night you kicked your mother-in-law out of the house like an outdated piece of furniture. Just then, Emily stepped between us. Her voice was weak but resolute. Ryan, that's enough. He spun around to her, astonished as if he had just been betrayed. What did you just say? I said, you need to stop, Emily repeated, this time her voice louder, clearer. Mom isn't your enemy. She never has been. You're the one who turned everything into a battlefield. Ryan looked at her as if he had just been slapped. And in a way, he had. Slapped with the truth. Emily turned to me, her eyes still shaky but honest. I swear, I didn't know. About the building, about the money, about anything you did. I nodded slowly. I know. But why didn't you tell me? She choked out. Because there are some things you have to see with your own eyes, I replied. Hearing isn't enough. Emily blinked rapidly to hold back tears. Ryan laughed dryly, taking a step back. You two are perfect for each other, he muttered. No, I answered softly but firmly. She deserves better. I turned and left the room. And for the first time since the night I was kicked out of that kitchen, I felt something shift inside me. Not revenge, not pride, but strength, a quiet strength, not noisy but completely my own. 4 days later, Emily showed up at my door, unannounced, no phone call. In her hand was something that made my knees buckle as soon as I saw it, an old, leather-bound notebook, the corners torn, the spine almost falling apart. My mother's diary. I opened the door, not saying a word. Emily stepped inside, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her eyes wide. "I found it in the closet," she said softly. "I guess you left it behind the last time I came over." She placed the diary on the coffee table, as if it were a sacred object, and to me it was. "I read it," she said quickly, almost afraid I'd be angry. Not because I was deliberately snooping, but because I recognized her handwriting. I was just looking for something that made sense, something that proved I still had roots. The room fell silent, a silence that wasn't stifling, but reverent, like standing before something undeniable. "I still didn't know about Harold Sterling," she whispered, "or about the money, or the trust fund. I didn't know anything." I nodded. "Neither did I, Emily. Not until I had nothing left to lose." Her voice choked. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe you were helpless?" I looked straight into her eyes, and this time she didn't look away. "Because I was helpless. The night you slammed that door shut, I had no plan, no money, no one to call, no place to cry without being afraid someone would knock and tell me to be quiet." Emily fidgeted, her hands still clasped together. "I found that diary at the worst possible time, when I was counting every penny to buy dinner, when I hadn't talked to anyone in almost a week. That diary didn't just remind me who I was. It reminded me that I used to matter to someone, that Grandma had loved you, and that you had loved me. Both of you had fought for me, just in ways I didn't realize." Emily sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as if trying to hold onto something that was slipping away. I don't know when I became the kind of daughter who could do such terrible things to her own mother. I keep asking myself that question, over and over again. I walked to the window, looking down at the street below, where life was still flowing calmly, unaware that two women were relearning how to look at each other and forgive. "You didn't become that person overnight," I said, my voice even, as if peeling away layers of fog in my mind. It were small choices, over and over, staying silent when you should have spoken up, choosing comfort over truth, mistaking loyalty for love, even when it hurt you. Emily stood up, walking slowly towards me. I left him. Those words exploded in the space like a silent bomb. He went through my things again, my computer, my purse, my phone. I told him to stop. I said enough was enough, and he screamed like always, but then he packed his bags, slammed the door, and disappeared. In the note he scribbled, he wrote, "I'm being hunted. Your mother has destroyed my life." I turned to her, my eyes wide. I was stunned, not because Ryan had left. I always knew that day would come, but because Emily had chosen right. "I don't know who I am without him," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I'd rather go find that person than keep losing myself." Between us was a silence, not cold, but heavy. A silence heavy with things that had been hidden, things that had been swallowed down. Emily looked down, looking at the diary on the table. "I don't deserve everything you've done, everything we've done to you. I can't fix the past, but I want to start over." I walked slowly to her side, sat down next to her, feeling each step as if I was shedding a burden of years. "I used to dream of hearing those words," I said, "and now that you've said them, they can't change what happened. But they're rewriting how you look at it." Emily frowned as if not understanding. I took her hand gently. "You see me now, clearly, enough to understand that I'm not weak. I never was weak, and that changes everything." We sat there for a long time, not speaking, not needing to, a rare kind of silence, not hurting but healing, a silence that came after the truth had finally had its say. Before Emily left that night, she stopped at the door. "You didn't raise me to be weak," she said, her eyes looking at me without blinking. "I just forgot how strong you were." I smiled slightly, just enough to stir a memory. No, you didn't forget. You just stopped looking, and now finally she had seen. Not just the woman I had become, but the person I had always been. When the email from Ryan came, I almost didn't open it. The subject line was short. We need to talk. Just that, and my stomach clenched as if sensing a coming storm. I read it slowly. I know everything about the building, about the inheritance, about your little shameful affair with Sterling. You think you're clever, think you can destroy my life and walk away with a smile on your face. Let me be blunt. If you don't undo all of this, I'm going to take everything to the press. Your name, your past, your mother, everything. Let's see how long you can keep your reputation intact. I sat there, my eyes glued to the screen, not angry, not afraid. Finally, he had connected the dots. Whether it was because of Emily or because he had dug it up himself no longer mattered. I had been waiting for this moment for a long time. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. And the next morning, Ryan received a letter demanding that he cease his harassment immediately. Enclosed was a complete file. The threatening messages he had sent to the management office, the forged documents in the name of the fake law firm, the fake emails that had been traced back to his IP address, himself, the residents' complaints, the vandalism log in the building, and even the public recordings where he had insulted others. We didn't need to press criminal charges. A defamation and harassment lawsuit was enough to shut down his game. He panicked. I knew it because Emily called me 2 days later. He's gone, Emily said, her voice shaking. I'm sorry, I replied. I understand. I used to be there, where fear turns you into someone else. Fear can shrink a person so much that they don't recognize themselves anymore. But you don't have to stay there forever. Ryan tried to retaliate afterwards. Vague. Allusions on social media, cryptic words, talking about betrayal, lies. But he never dared to name names. Not after receiving the second letter from my lawyer, threatening legal action for every sentence, every word. Then he went silent, publicly anyway. Privately, I knew he would never forget the moment he realized the woman he had once kicked out on the street with 2 suitcases and a tired face now owned the roof over his head, the lease under his name, and the key to every door he had ever slammed in my face. What about Emily? She changed. She left the apartment within a month, rented a small place near her work, started therapy, joined a community art class. Once she brought me an abstract painting, a phoenix, deep red and blazing gold. I hung it over the fireplace, a symbol not only of her rebirth, but of mine. Now we talk more often, not every day, but when we talk, it's real, no more pretending, no more evading. And then the final piece arrived, an envelope, a letter from Mr. Goldstein, my mother's lawyer. Congratulations, Kennedy. The building has been officially transferred. All the remaining tenants had finally signed the new agreements. From now on, I had full control to sell, to keep, or to restructure the building as I chose. Folded the letter, hugging it to my chest as if it were the deed to a new life. It wasn't just about property or money or revenge. It was about truth, about reclaiming my name, my story, and the strength they had thought had been extinguished. The next morning, I contacted Robert Ellison, the lawyer who had given me my $3 million inheritance from William Henry Caldwell, and asked him to find a buyer for the block. The auction took place quickly. A real estate company paid $3.8 million for the entire block, a larger sum than I had imagined. I sat in Ellison's office signing the paperwork, feeling a sense of relief as if a burden had been lifted. I kept $1 million to secure my future and used $1.8 million to build a charitable housing complex called Mary House for struggling women and children, people like me, who had once huddled under the Market Street Bridge, hugging a photo of their husband in the rain. At the opening ceremony, under the bright sunlight, I stood before the crowd, reading a speech about my mother. Mary Harper taught me that love is a quiet strength. She hid the secret of my father, but left me a legacy. Not just money, but resilience. I looked at the Mary House sign, tears falling silently. Mom, if you were here, I hope you'd be proud. But my mind wasn't just at Mary House. Emily, my daughter, was fighting her own storm. After leaving Ryan, who had slapped her, who had pushed their lives into suffocation, Emily moved into a small apartment in Charleston. She was attending therapy, painting in an art class, trying to rebuild her life. I met her a few times, eating dinner of grilled cheese and tomato soup like when she was little. We laughed, but there was still distance. The wound from the "Don't freeload off us" text, from the night she was silent when Ryan threw my suitcases out the door, hadn't healed yet. I gave her the Phoenix painting, and she hung it in her room, but I knew she wasn't ready to fully be my daughter again. Then one morning, I received a call from the hospital. Emily had been admitted for a nervous breakdown, a consequence of the months of living in fear with Ryan. I drove there, my heart pounding, remembering the night I had a high fever in the motel, hugging John's photo without daring to call her. The doctor said Emily was severely stressed, needing long-term treatment. I sat by her bed, looking at her pale face, the faint bruise on her cheek from Ryan's slap still haunting me. I didn't say anything, just took her hand, feeling her faint warmth. I quietly paid her hospital bills through Ellison, asking him not to let Emily know. Tell her it's support from the hospital, I instructed. I didn't want her to feel indebted, didn't want her to think I was doing this to atone. I was doing it because she was my daughter, even though she had once turned her back. Before leaving the hospital, I placed a white chrysanthemum, the flower Emily loved as a child, and my mother's diary by her bedside. In the diary, I clipped a small piece of paper writing, "You don't need anyone to prove your worth. You and are enough. I will always love you." I didn't sign it, but I knew Emily would understand. I looked at her one last time, her eyes closed tightly, her breathing even. I walked out, not looking back, feeling like I had just left a part of my heart behind. I didn't know if Emily would forgive me or if I would fully forgive her. But I knew somehow we had started to heal. I returned to my small house, stood before the Phoenix painting, feeling like the fire within had calmed, no longer anger but light. I opened my watercolor box, painted a new picture, 2 phoenixes flying together, one large, one small, under my mother's blue sky. I hung it next to the old painting, smiling. I had fulfilled my dream of being an artist, organized a small exhibition in Charleston, sold 5 paintings. But more important than anything, I had forgiven myself. I used to think I was a freeloader, like Ryan said, used to think I had failed when Emily blocked my number. But I wasn't that person. I was Kennedy Walsh, who survived under the bridge, through the pain of losing her husband, through the betrayal of her daughter. I was the spark that no one could extinguish. Love isn't blind sacrifice, like the way I gave up my dreams to raise Emily. Love is the strength to stand up, to forgive, to be true to yourself. I had come a long way from the rainy night under the bridge, from my mother's diary, to the block I owned. And if I could do it, so can you. If this story touched you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of strength and healing, because each of us has a spark. You just have to dare to let it burn.